Hi, I'm Sanka Kara with LightNet, and we're doing a follow-up check-in with Nikolai Thompson, who entered one of the Keshe Foundation's teleportation devices. This interview was on Unlimited, and now we're doing the follow-up. We've tracked Nikolai down in Europe, in Spain, where he is now, to ask him what happened. So here we go. Nikolai, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, and thanks for doing another little check-in.
Yeah, so this is super exciting because, when we last talked, it was such a great unknown. They were sending people to the moon, they were sending people through different spaces. Like, this is totally experimental. You're signing your life away when you're when you're about to get in this thing. You had no idea, but you were trusting with your heart that because you've been studying with the Keshe Foundation, you were trusting like this is going to be okay. And you went through a ton of experiments while you were in the device over the course of 2 days. So what is, fill us in.
Yeah, it's almost hard to know where to begin. I mean, we went as a group, so there was 3 of us there, my friend Sasha, his girlfriend Zoa, and I. And we went in as the first 3 Canadians. So that was kind of fun. And Keshe will always probably remember us as the Canadians. So that was interesting. But yeah, we went through on day 1 and had what we thought was going to be, so the word that the Keshe Foundation uses is transmutation. And in a way, what we can learn from that word and that language that they're trying to use is not necessarily teleportation like we would expect and we've seen in films. So we kind of have a preconceived notion of what that means in science fiction, and kind of that's what's come into the cultural perspective. But I would almost say a better way to describe what transmutation really is, and we didn't get to fully experience it, but we were there as, I'll say, guinea pigs for him to learn and for him to know more about what he's doing and what they're doing in their systems. So we essentially aided them in furthering their development and testing certain things. So we can get into all that, but in a way, this is kind of what Jesus would have done when he was essentially put up on the cross and he came back. And so this is the idea of moving the essence of the beings out of their physical bodies, moving their souls to a new position and having the soul remanifest the body. So in a way, this is like death and rebirth, not like physically moving your atoms from one place to another. So we can get into a little bit about that, but there was a number of experiences that were shared with us when we were there of other people, Keshe speaking to us about other things that have happened, where essentially a woman, like I think the week before us, was left with they basically had a cold body in the room, and she had moved her energetic fields over to the other system. And then their system wasn't set up to move the physical body. And that was by design. It wasn't like it was a failure. They'd not done the last stage on purpose because they didn't think that was going to happen. Well, here comes somebody who's fully ready to go, does the movement, and then they have to call the souls back into the body and essentially had this body reanimated. So it was fascinating to hear that. And but yeah, our experiences were not as dramatic.
Yeah, that is amazing though. To understand the mechanics and that's what we do when we astral travel, except we don't remanifest our body in the other spot.
Right. Yeah, and that's what we're doing all night, all the time, and thinking that it doesn't count or isn't real, right? Like this is what we've been discounting in our dream state this whole time. It's like a separate life that we're living, and we're dealing with things that are in our subconscious that we're coming up, and we're trying to like process certain things in a certain way that we maybe can't do in the physical body. So we go in the astral and go meet our friends or resolve some conflict and come back and remember maybe 1/10 of 1% of it and call it a dream. Well, the soul's had a whole life over there and it's done a whole other thing. And we're not necessarily acknowledging that up until now. But this is essentially the technology of resurrection. So at some point, we'll all remember how to do this. And it's not because we've gone through some room, but it's basically just a remembrance of what we can already do.
That's so interesting. Someone this morning was like, yeah, I think I slept 15 minutes, but then I was somewhere else and I was there for a longer amount of time and came back. So that's so interesting. So you we're working with a couple things. So you were working with physical objects like biscuits and physical things, because they were like, can we send an apple pie over to the other jump room, to the other pod? And you guys were also working with sending love to leaders, and I think world leaders. And we've been working in our LightNet labs with telepathy, and one of the things that's been so fascinating is that we can send people in our life, and I've experienced it because I know I've experienced sending people that I've had conflict with love, and then all of a sudden our relationships gets better and we haven't done anything, we haven't talked. So it's almost like energy cannot be created or just or destroyed. So sending energy to, and you can talk about how you guys sent energy to Putin, what do you think of the experiment in general, and what do you think happened?
Yeah, that was a fascinating one. So to describe the room a little bit for you, there was two systems. Again, far more advanced than I'd ever seen. I had no idea what's going on. And this is someone like me, have seen some of these things. I have no clue what he was doing. Physically, I looked around and I was like, I couldn't like replicate this if I tried. I have no idea what this stuff is going on. But nothing is touching
400 Ganses, right?
I don't know. I have no fucking clue. That's how advanced this was. And they apparently, in the week that we'd been there and the week before or whatever in that period, had just thrown away like 100,000 euros worth of development work, scrapped it and said, no, we're past this. We need to keep this for later maybe. But we advanced to some point, either the week before we showed up or through us being there. They'd learned so much, they went, okay, we're on to the next stage. But back to your question, and the setup of the room, there was two systems. So one on each side of the room, kind of as you walk in, one on the right and one on the left. And the one on the left, as you walked into the room, was a system that had two chairs in it. One had a captain's chair and one was like a passenger behind it, and the same on the other side. The one on the left could send and receive. The one on the right was fully locked out of sending. It could only receive. So depending on what the experiments were going on, he would have different people in different chairs and asking them to do different things. So for the experiment with Putin, Mr. Keshe brought in, I think, a phone or a picture. I think it was a phone with a picture of his face on it, and put it on this little like chair and sat it in the captain's chair of the receiving unit. So the one that could not send out. And Sasha's girlfriend, Zoa, was behind him in that receiving unit. Sasha was in the sending unit chair, like the head chair, and I was behind him. And so in that interaction, we didn't know who the world leader was that he was bringing in. He didn't tell us who it was. But as soon as he opened the door and walked over there to like put the phone in, he just said, I've got to bring a world leader into the room, and you guys, it's your job to elevate him. I knew immediately it was Putin. Immediately, there was no question. I'm like, okay, interesting. And I sat in the back, and I had an interesting experience where my right hand was shaking. And it was kind of like my left hand was steady, my right hand was shaking. And I had this experience, and I basically just assisted Sasha with his mission, which was I knew Sasha was sending love to the leader. And so I was just going to help him do that. But because I'm not in the captain's chair, I didn't know if I could even reach the other side. So there's all these like preconceived like things happening, and also like physical field blocks from us doing certain things, which is, for me, super fascinating. But essentially Sasha sends him love and is cuddling him and like telling him he's doing great, whatever. I don't know exactly what that conversation was, but I'm essentially just assisting him, sending my fields to Sasha. But I also had this experience after, when I told Mr. Keshe, well, my right hand was shaking, and he laughed and he said, oh, you're afraid to give. So he calls the right hand the giving hand, the left hand the receiving one, or the sending and receiving, as we do as well in the spiritual community, kind of follow that. And so he started laughing. He said some reference to a movie, and he's like, oh, have you ever seen the movie where Whoopi Goldberg is writing a check to a nun and her hand is shaking and she can't give the check? And I was like, no, but that's hilarious. And anyway, he laughed about that and kind of carried on. But what happened on the other side for Zoa, which was very interesting, is she starts laughing in the receiving unit because she's hearing Sasha speaking in Russian. And she doesn't speak Russian. And Sasha speaks a little bit of Russian. So Sasha is speaking Russian to Putin, but she's receiving it. And she's like laughing because she's like, honey, why are you talking to me in Russian? I don't know how to speak this language. What are you doing? What is this? So when she shared that, Mr. Keshe turned around and was very interested in that. He said, "What do you mean? Does he always do this?" And she's like, "No, no, like I don't speak that language ever. Like there's no connection for me at all." And he just thought that was fascinating. So we're able to perceive things across the room at the speed of thought without in any interaction. So that was really interesting. And
That
yeah,
is really
more with
interesting.
but that was fascinating. That was a really fascinating data set.
Wow. So it's facilitating this telepathic exchange, really, this energetic exchange, which is going to be a physical exchange pretty soon. Um,
Yeah, it
and
was instant. It was instant
it,
knowing, instant feeling. It's like when something worked, it was like that, like no time at all. Like on the first day, in the reverse, when I was sitting in the chair where Putin was, and Zoa was sitting in the sending unit on the other side, she tried to send me the heat from Sedona. And meanwhile, her partner, Sasha, is in the back chair of her sending and receiving unit, shaking, like cold, physically cold in the room. And I'm like the full left side of my face is so warm and hot. And I'm like feeling really like glowingly the Sedona heat. And Keshe comes in later, goes, "Hey, like, what did you feel?" And I said, "Well, my whole left side was really warm and I was really feeling that." And Zoa just smiled. She's like, "I was trying to send you the sun from Sedona." And I was like, wow, that worked. So like when the things work, there's no questions, there's no nothing. And it's again like a feeling of sunshine in a cold, dark room in Austria where there's no windows. Like,
so that's so crazy. So do you think that when you start to send the apple pie and the biscuit, that it will be eventually you'll just be like, I'll just send you something, like I'll say, like will I have to put the biscuit in the jump room in the future, or will I just send you something like in thought form?
well, that's a good question. I don't think we need the jump rooms at all at some point. And one of the recent teachings, Keshe talked about this and he said, you know, humans are going to look back in time and laugh that we ever made the machines at all because we don't need them. We never needed them. But did we need them to get to this understanding? Yeah, maybe. Right. So it's always this like stair step evolution to go from where we were at to the next stage and then the next stage. And then we look back and go, oh shit, did I ever need those tools? And it's like, yeah, you kind of did, but also no. So yeah, that's fascinating. I think in a way we'll all be able to just send each other these things at will. And again, at that point, are you open to receiving it? In these systems, we were specifically blocked in different places on purpose. Like we didn't know what the experiment was. And so he might have said like, hey, try to send this cookie to somebody in the room or have somebody on the Zoom call try to send something into the room. That was another interesting experiment.
Yeah,
That
because
was
you messed up the whole biscuit thing, because you were sending it to all these, you were sending
oh
it to
yeah,
people that
I
weren't in
missed
the
the
jump
target.
room. And he's like, why didn't you send it to people? And you're like, I didn't understand
Well,
where.
and fascinatingly enough, like so, yeah, I had a biscuit in my hand, and he just said, "Send this to someone," and walked out of the room. Well, I missed the point. He meant send this to someone in the room, I presume, and so I didn't send it specifically to any of them. But Sasha was sending his thing, which was a like a single Twix bar, to Zoa on the other side, and she felt this like long rectangular like chocolate thing candy in her hand, but then also didn't really know what it was, and was kind of like, what is this? And for a flash, she received a brown square flat thing, which was exactly the biscuit that I had in my hand. But she convinced herself that that wasn't what she was receiving. She was like, no, 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 no. I'm getting this black long square thing. It's not a biscuit. And then when we showed what we had later, she was like, that is exactly what I received. But I convinced myself that I didn't. So because we were both in that other unit sending the same thing, I didn't send it to her, but I eventually sent it to all beings because I was pissed
Are
because
you
at first,
feeding the world?
well, this is the good question. And what is this technology really doing? So at a certain point in time, is any of this necessary? Do we actually need an apple? Do we actually need to go to the store and buy groceries? Like if I can send
So
something to you and we don't need a room or a facility to do so, what are we tapping into?
yeah, that was what the conversation was last night in Sedona. It was, we're going to start needing to eat less. In fact, we're going to start eating a lot less. Like at some point, will be breatharians, because it's not about the physical, it's our brain that needs the. Oh, this is so mind-blowing. Well, you guys, if you want to hear more about Nikolai's work, you can find him at The Return of Tesla on his Instagram. And you can also watch the interviews. We did 2 interviews, him with Sasha, who went in the jump room with him. And we did a solo interview with him before this experiment on Unlimited CAN TV. There's an app, you can get it on Apple, Roku, and Amazon Fire. Just look for CAN TV, Conscious Awakening Network. And we, so yeah, what an incredible courage you've had to do that. And what, you know, you have the mind of a scientist, but you have the mind of like a high ascended master at the same time, which is just like an incredible combination. To ask these questions, to think about these ideas, to philosophically understand the sheer impact of what Keshe is doing right now and experimenting with. So it's incredible. Do you have any closing thoughts for us about what we should be thinking about and what happened while you were there and what changed in your mind?
I mean, closing thoughts, I could probably talk on this for hours, and maybe we'll do a longer interview later. But I mean, really just, this is now, right? This is the future that we've all been thinking about in like 30 years is happening literally now. And tap in. Like, you don't need to go physically to any of these locations to go and experience this technology. Like, it's a technology, and we're going to be able to use it to help in certain ways, but go inside, go into meditation, whatever your methods are for finding that like inner light, and ask yourself the questions that you want to ask. Like, we're all one consciousness exploring itself forever, and we don't need to go to some master up on a hill or be some monk in a temple somewhere to tap in. Like, we all have these answers inside of us. So yeah, explore that world.
Thank you so much, Nikolai.
You're welcome. Take care.